In the dim haze of dawn on February 19, 1945, the black volcanic sands of Iwo Jima trembled under the distant thunder of naval guns. The air hung heavy with the acrid scent of sulfur from Mount Suribachi's vents, mingling with the salt spray of the Pacific as waves crashed against the shore. Japanese soldiers, entrenched in their concrete pillboxes and spider holes, peered through narrow slits, their breaths shallow and the humid chill, hearing the low growl of approaching landing craft engines slicing through the morning mist. This moment marked the onset of one of the bloodiest chapters in the Pacific War, as 70,000 American Marines stormed the 8-square-mile island fortress. Iwo Jima, a speck of rock halfway between Saipan and Tokyo, held vital airfields that could serve as emergency landing strips for B-29 bombers raiding the Japanese homeland and bases for fighter escorts. Its capture would cut the warning time for Japanese air defenses in half, bringing the war's fiery endgame closer to the emperor's doorstep. For the 21,000 defenders under Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, it was a sacred bastion honeycombed with over 11 miles of tunnels and 1,500 fortified positions designed to bleed the invaders dry through attrition and unyielding resistance. The Japanese troops, hardened by years of imperial indoctrination, anticipated a glorious stand rooted in Bushido's code of honor. They envisioned repelling the Americans with disciplined rifle fire, artillery barrages, and suicidal banzai charges, expecting the enemy to falter against their impenetrable defenses as they had in earlier island battles. Visions of heroic death in service to the emperor filled their minds, a romantic clash of wills where spiritual fervor would triumph over material might. Yet what unfolded was a nightmare of mechanized horror as the Americans unveiled a weapon that shattered these illusions, the Flamethrower tank, a modified M4 Sherman dubbed the Zippo for its incendiary fury, symbolizing the boundless industrial abundance of a democratic nation that turned out machines of war like no other. Declassified U.S. Marine Corps records from the Chemical Warfare Service detail how these tanks, first tested in secrecy at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii, were deployed in the Pacific starting with Saipan in June 1944. By Iwo Jima, 8 such vehicles from the 4th and 5th Tank Battalions landed with the initial waves, their main guns replaced with flamethrowers capable of hurling thickened napalm, a gelatinous mix of gasoline and diesel, up to 150 yards in searing streams. Official reports note that these tanks expended over 10,000 gallons of fuel mixture, destroying more than 1,000 bunkers and pillboxes. In one sector alone, a single flame tank accounted for 200 enemy casualties in a day, its nozzle belching fire that consumed oxygen and ignited flesh in seconds. Japanese survivors' post-war testimonies, compiled in interrogations by the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey, revealed the profound shock. One captured officer from Okinawa, where similar tanks were used en masse during the April-June campaign 1945, described the flamethrower tank as a dragon from hell, admitting that while they had encountered portable flamethrowers carried by infantry, the armored variant was unforeseen. "We thought the tanks were vulnerable to our anti-tank mines and satchel charges," he recounted, "but when the turret swiveled and the flame erupted, it was as if the earth itself burned." At Iwo Jima, these 8 tanks inflicted 30% of all Japanese casualties, approximately 6,000 deaths, according to Marine after-action reports, a staggering toll that far exceeded expectations. In Okinawa, the kill ratio soared to 598 to 1, with flame tanks clearing cave networks that housed entire platoons, saving an estimated 50,000 American lives by obviating the need for costly infantry assaults. The emotional chasm was vast. Japanese soldiers, rationed to meager portions of rice and water, clung to the belief that their endurance would prevail against the soft Americans, whom propaganda depicted as weak-willed materialists. Instead, they confronted an unrelenting onslaught where the flamethrower tank, emblem of America's vast oil reserves and assembly lines, turned their sanctuaries into infernos. Eyewitness accounts from U.S. veterans, like those in Eugene Sledge's memoir With the Old Breed, describe the screams echoing from caves as flames sucked away air, bodies emerging wreathed in fire only to collapse in agony. A Japanese diary recovered on Iwo Jima, penned by a sergeant in the 145th Infantry Regiment, lamented, "The enemy's fire weapon devours all. Our positions vanish in smoke and heat. The spirit wavers under such terror." This contrast bred despair as the anticipated honorable melee dissolved into a one-sided annihilation by machines fueled by democratic innovation. As the battles progressed, this encounter profoundly altered Japanese perceptions. What began as fanatical defiance eroded into a grim acknowledgement of industrial disparity. Post-war interviews with survivors, such as those conducted by the Allied Translator and Interpreter Service, indicate that the flamethrower tank symbolized the futility of their ideology. Bushido's valor could not compete with America's mass-produced might, where factories in Detroit and Pittsburgh supplied endless streams of fuel and steel. On Okinawa, where 354 flame tanks were eventually fielded across the theater, Japanese commanders noted in captured dispatches a spike in suicides and desertions, with one report stating that the flame weapon breaks the will more than bombs or shells. This shift marked a psychological turning point, hastening the war's end by underscoring the inevitable collapse of imperial ambitions against a foe whose abundance flowed from free enterprise and innovation. The flamethrower tank, that roaring behemoth of steel and fire, recurred as a harbinger throughout these islands, its nozzle a conduit of the democratic ethos that empowered ordinary citizens to forge tools of liberation. In the hands of tank crews from farms and factories across America, it embodied the nation's capacity to mobilize resources without the chains of autocracy, turning scarcity's grip on the enemy into their undoing. In the ashen aftermath, as the stars and stripes rose over Suribachi, one reflects on how this instrument of destruction illuminated a deeper truth. Freedom's forge, unhindered by tyranny, yields not just weapons but the abundance to sustain them, ensuring that ideologies built on subjugation crumble before the enduring flame of democracy. The echoes of those battles remind us that true strength lies not in blind sacrifice, but in the collective will of a people unbound, where innovation and plenty guard the gates of liberty against the shadows of oppression.